Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sania from Sneha Society for Counseling. And on behalf of all of us at Sneha, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you for this webinar. Before we start, a few words about Sneha. Sneha Society for Counseling is a voluntary organization of trained individuals that helps people share feelings of emotional distress without fear of being judged. As counselors, we are aware that lay counseling comes as a soothing first line of support to address any situation. With this prime objective in mind, way back in 2004, a group of like-minded people with experience in the field of lay counseling started a center, essentially to cater to the needs of people with emotional stress in a safe and non-threatening atmosphere, and importantly, made accessible to all the sections of the society. Sneha Society for Counseling was formed under the Karnataka Registered Societies Act. Our vision is to have a society where people have the opportunity to be listened to when in distress. Our mission is to make mental and emotional health a priority. Our beliefs are, it's our strong belief, Major, that a person has sufficient positive energy to face challenges in life. We at Sneha help empower our counselees to recognize their inner strengths to deal with their issues. We work out of Himanshu Jyotikala Pitha in Malleshwaram, Bangalore. People come to us with a variety of issues like relationship between couples, relationship between parents and children, anxiety, abuse, depression, grief, anger, low confidence, and even suicidal thoughts. We offer both in-person counseling services as well as telecounseling services. Our services are free and totally confidential. Besides counseling, we also conduct programs in schools, colleges, and other forums to mainly spread awareness on mental health. In our 21 years of existence, we are happy to say that we have definitely made at least a small contribution to reduce the social stigma around mental health and counseling and make a positive difference in many people's lives. For more details, please reach out to us on our helplines. Now today, as a part of our community outreach activities, we try to bring in experts in the field of mental health to the public forum so that we can learn how to navigate when we face the challenges in life. All of us as parents, teachers, and counselors are concerned about our young generation. They are the future of our world. But today's world is rapidly evolving and changing. Can we just imagine the complexities in which our adolescents are growing? The challenges are really many. We all lead very busy lives. Then there is lack of dialogues, increasing academic expectations, peer pressures, not to forget the social media. These have significant impact on the development of our younger generation. At times, we see them struggling. They can be confused, overwhelmed, and may turn to various risky behaviors. How do we understand and help our adolescents? How do we build the bridges of communication with them? How do we help them to build and sustain resilience? To empower us today, we have invited a very distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Vivek Benegal. Dr. Benegal, a wholehearted welcome from all of us at Sneha and the participants. We are really very grateful that you are making time to address us on a Saturday afternoon. Before I request our volunteer Rupa to introduce Dr. Benegal to us, a few points to be noted by all of us. Kindly mute yourself throughout the presentation till the Q&A sessions. Please post your questions in the chat box, which will be addressed as many as possible at the end of the session. Once again, a warm welcome to all the participants, and over to Rupa.
Thank you, Sanya. Let me introduce Dr. Vivek Benegal. I think I've eaten his head quite some time now. Dr. Vivek Benegal is a renowned psychiatrist specializing in addiction medicine. He is a professor of psychiatry and has played a key role in establishing treatment services and protocols for addiction medicine in India. He has worked at NIMANS, Bangalore, and is currently an adjunct professor at Kasturba Medical College, Manipal. His expertise includes for adolescents and young adults with addictive disorders, and he has explored brain development trajectories across the human lifespan. He has received the Newton Bhabha Award for his work on Consortium on Vulnerability to Externalizing Disorders and Addictions. Mr. Benegal leads and co-leads various studies on brain development, mental health, and substance use, including the National Mental Health Surveys of India. He's passionate about advancing psychotherapy training and personalized medicine in mental health. Thank you, and once again, welcome, Doctor.
Okay. So thank you, and thank you very much for that introduction to your counseling group, and I congratulate you for the wonderful work that you've been doing, and for the long period that you have been able to sustain it. So today, what I will try to talk to you about. I hope it is going to be a discussion. Is basically about how to deal with youngsters. I mean, what I will do is I will share my slides so that I.
Permission to come on how will you join on it?
Okay.
College, how can you join in?
All right. Is this visible and can you hear me?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So today we'll talk a little bit about working with youngsters. And the reason I will talk about working with youngsters, I will, unfold in a few seconds. But just to give a background on why I wanted to focus on youngsters, I mean, for the last 30 or 40 years of my life, as Ms. Rupa detailed, I've been working with youngsters because I've been working with young people who have difficulties with addictive disorders and other high-risk behaviors. But also, my research work has consisted of asking the question, who is at risk? Because, I mean, you can go and try and address everybody, or you can look at people who are at higher risk and address those risks and start intervening very early. Because the earlier you intervene, the better the prognosis, the better the outcomes are. Once any illness, whether it's heart disease or diabetes or whether it's cancer, or it is mental illness, once the diseases have developed fully, the prognosis gets worse. It becomes that much more difficult to deal with it. And it's in that context that, I would like to have today's discussion. And thank you for some of the helpful hints that some of you sent. These are some of the hints. I mean, I may not be able to approach all of them in detail, but I have tried to cover most of these points in my presentation. If there are any things that you want to know over and above this, I'm very, very glad to discuss those. So the first question to ask is, who usually comes to our attention? Who are the group of people who require help? And the answer to that, I mean, unfortunately, psychiatric disorders are predominantly early onset conditions. Most psychiatric disorders begin very early in life. In fact, you would be surprised to know that half of all mental disorders, actually more than half of all mental disorders, start by adolescence or young adulthood. And now we are also starting to learn that even the disorders of old age, whether it is dementia, whether it is Parkinson's disease, etc., have their roots very early on in life. Adolescents and young adults, unfortunately, this group between 12 to 39 years, 12 to 40 years, carry a major share of the global burden of mental disorders. And early onset conditions like depression, anxiety, and substance use disorders dominate this age group. If you have a look at this illustration, you'll find that psychiatric disorders are predominantly early onset conditions. And half of all cases, as I mentioned, appear by adolescents, and nearly three-fourths have occurred by the time young adulthood, 25 years of age. So if there is a focus, we really need to focus on the young. How young, we shall discuss. Who are the persons in difficulty? I mean, who are the kinds of people who you get to see either in your counseling practice or in the clinics, or who are the people who are making the news in the newspapers here as being in difficulty? Number one, there's a group of young people who express their distress outwardly. These are called externalizing disorders. Don't worry about the name. But these are people who tend to have problems with aggression. They are in conflict with various authorities. They're in conflict with teachers, parents, conflict with the law, etc., etc. These are also young people who have a difficulty of control. They have loss of control with alcohol, tobacco, other drugs, or loss of control with other high-risk behaviors, whether it is, social media, whether it is gambling, driving fast, getting into conflict, etc. Then there is another group whose distress comes out in terms of self-harm, and it's basically violence which is expressed towards the self and very, very rarely to the others. So this is one cluster. The other cluster are people who express their distress inwardly. So from the outside, it's not very obvious. These are people who suffer a lot, but to the outsider, to the parents, to the teachers, to people in the community, it's not that evident. It's not that on the surface. These are young people who are anxious, depressed, who respond very badly to stress. They have prolonged, exaggerated response to, stressful events that happen. And essentially, these are young people who are unable to make sense of the trauma or the stress that they face. And because they have not, packed this trauma or stress, they respond in very many ways. Some of it is in bodily fashion. So it might affect their physical functioning. It might affect their sleep appetite, etc. It might affect in terms of skin disorders or blood pressure or various other physical or medical conditions as well. And then there's another group which is very small, but because this is so dramatic, this group of people have always captured the people's imaginations, people's concern, and that is people who have problems with thinking, who have difficulties in thinking, who cannot control their the thinking. They feel more threatened than others. They have difficulties. These are the people who develop psychotic disorders. But believe me, this is actually less than 1% of the population who develop problems, or 1% of the total population. Whereas the group A and the group B are actually much, much more. And if you're sitting in a clinic or if you're sitting in your counseling center, you will be seeing more of the group A or the group B. But when you talk to psychiatrists like us, we will be keeping on talking about the group C. So we really need to change our focus in a way, because what has happened is group A, group B are the people who have the maximum amount of need, but also because they are so how does one say, they ask so little that we offer so little. So basically, one can look at it in a slightly different way. And this is not people who have disorders, but generally in the population, if you look at some of these factors, mood and outlook on life, social self, how one interacts in society, interacts with friends, family, etc., adaptability and resilience, whether one can adapt to the day-to-day demands that the environment places on you, whether you can bounce back and be resilient to the stresses, drive, motivation, cognition, and the mind-body connection. Like I was talking about, that when you have difficulties in the mind, and this is expressed in the body, so people can be, and generally this is about everybody. This is about you, me, people who have difficulties, people who don't have difficulties. We basically live on a spectrum which goes from people who are thriving or succeeding, all down to people who are struggling or in distress. And as people who are working with other people, as healers, because we are all healers, we need to be able to to be sensitive to this whole spectrum, and not just worry about the people who are in the top of the pyramid, or the top of the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about who are the people who are at greater risk. Do we know? And yes, today the answer is we know who the people are at greater risk. And so you do have a template to use to go out and look for people who are likely to be at greater risk. And the risk factors that I'm going to talk about are transdiagnostic. Basically, it means that it is common across almost all psychiatric disorders, almost all presentations that come. So it's not people who have, say, schizophrenia or mood disorder or obsessive compulsive disorder or anxiety or depression. This is a common, we are more and more appreciating the fact that there are some people who are at higher risk for any psychiatric disorder. And some of these temperamental traits, some of these psychological abilities seem to underlie this general risk. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about it, because I feel it is important to look at these things, because it will give us the understanding to look for and to intervene with people who are at risk. And some of these things are sub-threshold. Remember, not everybody who comes to you for difficulties will have a diagnosis. In fact, most of the people who will come to you will probably not have a diagnosis and do not need to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So, I mean, this is a slightly busy slide, but I'll go over them one by one because I think this is very important. What are the common vulnerability traits? When I talk of vulnerability traits, you must remember that these are not black and white things. It's not as if you are normal or abnormal. It is on a continuum, that you might have traits with which you are doing very well, or you might have certain psychological abilities which put you into great difficulty because you're not able to deal with your environmental challenges, your daily environmental demands, or the acute challenges that you get from time to time. So these are basically five factors that I wanted to talk to you about. Number one is what we call cognitive control. It's also been called executive function, etc. But in its essence, it is the inability to sustain motivation. Okay. I mean, we all have, when we want to do something, accomplish a task, etc., we all rely on our motivation to start off something and to finish it. But you would have seen that there are some young people and some old people who have difficulty in persisting. They start off with a lot of enthusiasm, but halfway through they lose interest. So these are people who, despite the fact that they may be highly intelligent, highly creative, do very well in short tasks in short bursts. And but if the task gets a little long or a little boring, they tend to give up. So they usually have a record of starting off things and then moving on to something else. Start, stop, start, stop. And their parents will say, I mean, they're fickle-minded, they're unreliable, or they're always multitasking, etc. But these are also young people who, if they're interested, they can give very long and highly focused periods of attention, hyper-focus. And so you'll see young people who generally have difficulty in sticking to their studies, sticking to work, etc. But give them a computer game that they're interested in, or give them, some hobby that they're interested in, and they will do it for years and months, and go on and on, and until they complete it. So it's not invariable. The other thing that these young kids have is a higher impulsivity of both thought and action. So these are people who find it difficult to sit in one place. They're all the time fidgeting. They can't, stand in line. They find it very difficult to delay gratification. If I want it now, I want it now. Otherwise, I get very upset. And sometimes this impulsivity can be in terms of both vocal, that they blurt out answers in class even before the teacher has asked them, or whatever comes into their mind, they say it, and they get into trouble because of that. Or, in a sticky situation, in a difficult situation, they say whatever it is to get out of, of that situation. And it comes out as untruth, and, they are known as liars, etc. But they're just trying to get out of that situation the best they can without thinking of the consequences. These are also kids who are highly prone to self-harm, because again, they get upset very easily, and suddenly, they respond. They might respond by slashing themselves or by breaking the TV. So procrastination is also another thing that these kids have, difficulty getting started. And that is also related, procrastination, we look at it in moral terms, that this person does not have the moral fiber to do things, is always late on things. But we now recognize that a lot of the procrastination is because these kids are overthinking. They're going from one thought to another thought. I must do this, and then I must do that, and then I will be able to do this, right? So difficulty getting started on tasks, difficulties with self-organization and with prioritization. They can't work on priorities. They also have disorganization in thinking, so which leads to chaotic lifestyles. Hyperactivity, like I told you, sometimes happens. As you grow older, this becomes less of a problem. But in young children, hyperactivity seems to be a big problem. Overthinking, like I told you, going into thought loops is something that these kids also have. But side by side, you must remember, these are people who are capable of thinking out of the box. They have often high creativity, high intelligence in short bursts. But because they lose motivation, these are people who find that they are unable to live up to their potential. They are unable to touch the stars. And because they have repeated failures in this, they grow up thinking that I'm not worth it. They grow up thinking, they grow up with very negative thoughts about themselves and their abilities. So that is one set of difficulties which underlie risk for psychiatric problems, for mental health problems. The other set of difficulties are lack of emotional control, right? You might be prone to reactive discontrol, which means that you have mood swings, you're very moody, you respond, very, very disproportionately to things. That something happens, I get very upset. And if I get upset, I get 600% sad. I bounce back immediately, but by which time, or I get 800% angry, and I come down in half an hour or so, but by which time I would have done whatever damage had to be done. But these are not just this kind of mercurial, moody, sometimes over enthusiastic, but these are also children who are at higher risk for developing episodic mood disorders. You would have heard of depressive disorders, bipolar mood disorder. These are also young people who are at higher risk for that. Again, this places them at a risk for exaggerated perception of threat. They tend to look at things and see more threat than other kids do. And for example, one of the tests that we do with young people is we show them faces, emotional faces. and ask them to interpret what kind of face is this. So we show a smiling face, show an angry face, show a neutral face. And even when we show them the neutral face, they will say, oh, he is very angry, or he is very sad. So they tend to estimate or exaggerate, threatening emotions, even when there is lack of a threatening emotion. So in real life, these are people who respond to things that normally happen, or to respond to their parents or their friends, or by thinking that. Or rather by overestimating threat, so that you say something and they say, "Oh, why did you say that? You're being very threatening, etc." So they respond in a very exaggerated fashion. And so these are also children who are highly prone to later anxiety, depression. They're more prone to develop post-traumatic stress syndromes, because they respond, in an exaggerated manner to stress. They find it very difficult to wind down from their response to stress, etc. So that way. The third group of difficulties that again seem to underlie psychiatric disorders later is difficulty in emotional recognition. That is exactly what I was telling you about the inability to recognize other people's emotions, the inability to read what the other person is thinking. And so this comes out as lack of empathy. So these kids come out as aloof, insensitive, not caring, or they have, on the other hand, rejection sensitivity. They are highly, highly sensitive to rejection, whether it is real or imagined. And to the extent that some of the kids might get aggressive or depressed because they feel rejected. But some of the kids might even go to the extent that they don't want to get into a situation until they are absolutely sure that they will not be rejected. So they become socially avoidant, they withdraw from social situations, etc. The fourth group of difficulties, if I might put it that way, is what we call reward deficit. That we all get a sense of reward, a sense of wow from things which are natural rewards, whether it is food, sex, doing well in school, getting, making money. And this is part of nature's grand design. I mean, I'll talk a little bit about it in the next slide. But these are kids who don't get that sense of wow. And to get a sense of wow, to get a sense of, oh my God, let's do it again, they need supraphysiological, more than normal, more than the natural rewards, things which give other people, very, very high jolt of reward. So these are young people who are constantly in a state of boredom. They get bored very easily. They give up very easily and say, this is not interesting. They also have high sensation seeking. Their brains are seeking sensation. So they are. So that gives rise to a set of difficulties I'll come to in the next few slides. And 5, we're now finding, and this is very, very new. This data which we are now finding, that these are young people who also have some networks, some underfunctioning in some networks, which are responsible for sense of self, sense of purpose in life. So they often come out as very brittle. They don't have, they're not very quick to form this whole sense of self, and their purpose in life, sense of self, is very not strong enough. And so these are the lost children that you see, wandering around, and especially coming to your attention. Okay, I took a little bit of time over that slide, but I apologize. But I thought that this was important, but because this is the crucial thing. These are the kids that we really need to be looking for. These are the kids we really need to be learning to help. Okay, why? Why are some of these people at higher risk of developing problems with, whether it is alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, or other rewarding behaviors like cell phones, or social media, gambling, etc.? Before we go into the further, I must warn you that addictive disorders are just one of the many possible outcomes, you know, for young people who have this kind of risk. And again, let's talk a little bit. I'll take some 3 or 4 slides to talk about why some people are at higher risk specifically for addictive disorders. Now, why do some actions or stimuli, whether it is alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs, or whether it is, cell phones or, social media, why does it become so powerful? Now, all drugs of abuse and some behaviors activate the same brain areas which are meant to be activated by natural rewards. I was talking about it a little while back, only they activate them more strongly, supraphysiological. I mean, this is a very ancient circuit in our brain which evolved not just for human beings but for all animals. Basically, it evolved to control and regulate our ability to feel rewarded or pleasure, and it motivates us to repeat the beneficial behaviors, whether it's sex, food, shelter, etc., without which the species would die out. So this reward circuit actually evolution has created so that the species can live. However, as you can see, this is the kind of response you probably have with sex, food, shelters, the natural rewards. But the red line shows you the kind of response that you get with alcohol, tobacco, social media, gambling, risk-taking, etc., which is a much higher response. Now, with natural rewards that I talked about, most people get an appreciable increase, which means that they are likely to do it again. They are likely to do things which repeat. So if I have ice cream, I'm likely to want to eat ice cream. If I have sex, I'm likely to want to have sex again because this is naturally rewarding. But for people that we talked about who have a reward deficit, as you can see, where the threshold, the blue line, the blue dotted line is the threshold for understanding or for perceiving this reward, the response to natural rewards is very, very low. That red portion. And so natural rewards come off as, because they have a higher reward threshold, natural rewards come off as not very rewarding. So they respond to most of the natural rewards by saying, it's too boring. This supraphysiological rewards that I was talking about, alcohol, tobacco, bungee jumping, driving fast, for people who have a normal threshold, it's just too much. So they can take it once in a while. So they will be happy to, go bungee jumping once in their lifetime, or they'll be happy to, say, have a drink once in a fortnight or once in a month on Saturdays with friends. But for the other group who have a higher reward threshold, this is something that registers on their brain saying, oh, wow, this is unique. Let's do it again. And they tend to repeat it over and over and over again. And if you start anything early on in life and you do it over and over and over again, the brain learns, whether it is 5 times table or cycling or swimming or, alcohol, tobacco and other drugs. So then this becomes a very, very strong pattern in your brain. What we are understanding, and this is a little technical, but some humans who are at greater risk might be therefore self-medicating. People with a lower threshold, like I said, have lower dopaminergic functioning. Dopamine is this hormone or is this neurotransmitter which works in the reward circuit. And people who have a lower dopamine output, they'll find these things which increase dopamine a lot pleasant, relatively more reinforcing, and likely to be repeated. Unlike those which have a higher pre-existing level, who find them excessive, even unpleasant, and unlikely to repeat it frequently. So anything which increases dopamine, for example, whether it is drugs, alcohol, cocaine, coffee, tea, driving fast, getting into dangerous situations. They initially actually improve cognitive control in the vulnerable people. So what we feel is that it's not as if they are using substances or getting into these situations because they are enjoying it. Of course, they are enjoying it. But more than that, underlying that is that their brain functioning is actually getting normalized. Okay, and we need to understand that in these behaviors in this context, because most of the time we understand it in a very stigmatizing context. So, net, what happens is that these are kids who have all these difficulties that I talked about, difficulty in inability to reach their potential, repeated failures, who are fickle-minded, who have a high reward threshold, who have rapid mood shifts, who have poor coping strategies, who have negative self-evaluation. And these lead to earlier experimentation, earlier experimentation with peer groups who are also using these same things, which then lead to early repeated use. They also lead to initially better coping with cognitive and emotional deficits, which means that they are likely to use it over and over again. But the problem is that they're using something which is a bad medicine. Their only fault is that they're choosing something which is bad medicine. They're choosing a bad solution because these substances, etc., because of their intrinsic nature, these children develop tolerance, withdrawal, etc., which means that they have to keep taking in larger and larger doses to get the same amount. They affect the brain in different ways so that it changes the brain towards seeking and taking of the drug, etc. But I must say here that drug use, like I told you, is one possible outcome. Other high-risk behaviors are also a similar outcome for this group of young people. Also, the another outcome is that they respond disproportionately to outward stress, and that can give rise to a whole lot of other difficulties like depression, anxiety, and other things which can be another outcome. So why does addiction happen? Repeated use, like I said, like learning, strengthens the brain circuits related to seeking of a drug and taking of the drug. And this becomes much more stronger than the other behavior networks. So in a sense, rewiring happens. What we also know is the younger you start, greater the repetition and stronger the reward signal, greater the brain changes. So these result in very strong, deeply ingrained and difficult to lose or erase behaviors. Therefore, our normal solution of saying, let's take up a child and put him in a rehab center, keep them for 3 months, and he will forget, that is a very wrong notion, because these are hard-coded. Once the child comes out of the rehab center, he or she tends to restart again. Also, the changes that are occurring reshape the emotional circuits. So these behaviors of seeking and taking assume much greater emotional significance. And that also gives rise to some of the issues that you see in addictive disorders. Okay, very briefly, let us talk a little bit about why. Why do these happen? Why are there variations in our psychological abilities to deal with both daily environmental demands and acute challenges? I'm not going to go into details other than to say that the differences in our psychological abilities are actually a function of differences in the developmental trajectories, the rate at which our brains develop and the rate at which our brain networks develop. So the brain is sculpted from early fetal life, from before birth, throughout the lifespan, that is through childhood, adolescence, adulthood, into senescence and old age, through two forces. One is program-dependent development, that is basically going by the instructions which are written in our genes. And this is modified every day in every way by what we call experience-dependent development, where through exposure to our environments throughout life, from the time that you are a fetus in your mother's womb till the time you die, this keeps modifying the expression of the original genetic program through the lifespan and keeps making very, very strong changes, which are called epigenetic changes. So one of the key intermediate processes involved is stress inflammation, which is triggered by the environmental exposures. It's not really important to our talk other than to appreciate the fact that stress, exposure to stress, is a very, very important moderator or modulator of how the brain is sculpted. And therefore, strategies which protect you from stress, strategies which protect you from inflammation, are slowly becoming recognized as important strategies with which to intervene and which to treat and deal with some of these issues. Okay. Who is at risk? Will somebody please keep account of the time and let me know if I'm overstretching? So who is at risk? Number one, as I said earlier, youngsters are at risk because some of the patterns of behaviors commonly seen in adolescents and young adults, fleeting attention, mood swings, inability to read others' emotions, sensitivity to rejection, being perpetually bored, procrastinating, argumentative with parents, preoccupied with peers, and the likelihood of trying risky things are very, very good emotionally because they prepare adolescents for life ahead as adults. But they also make them vulnerable to developing high-risk behaviors, whether it's violence, self-harm, substances, high-risk sexual behaviors, mental illness, etc. But are all youngsters at risk? We now recognize that there are some youngsters who are at greater risk. I've already talked to you about some of the patterns which make some of these youngsters at greater risk. Also, having a family history, genetic risk, is a very, very important thing. And whereas some of these things like greater difficulties in psychological abilities are modifiable risk factors, and we are able to modify, and we should try to modify them, the genetic risk factors are probably as yet unmodifiable. Another another cause of risk is age at onset, whether it's age at onset of use of substances or age at onset of use of, say, cell phones. The earlier you start, the greater the risk. For example, here I am showing you some data which shows that if a child starts drinking at the age of 16 or younger, the risk of becoming an alcoholic by age 40 is around 60%. But if the same child is able to push the first age of drinking to say 20 to 25 years, the risk of becoming an alcoholic by age 40 comes down drastically to 5%, which is the general risk in the population. So again, these are modifiable factors. So we should look at using this knowledge to modify risk for children. I've brought this slide along because there is evidence to show that mental health problems increase with younger age at first smartphone use. And mental well-being has been consistently improved with older age of first ownership of a smartphone or tablet. And this includes things like problems with suicidal thoughts, feelings of aggression, sense of being detached from reality, hallucinations, etc., etc. Similarly, there's another factor which should concern us: exposure, and especially early exposure to ultra-processed food. And ultra-processed food consumption worsens mental well-being very, very significantly, especially in young people. And of course, you know that in old people, ultra-processed foods are also high-risk factors for cardiac illness, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, etc., etc. Another significant and very significant reason for risk for mental illnesses in general, as well as for substance use disorders, is early adversity. Multiple repeated environmental adversities in early life. You know, it could be things which happen in maternal life, during the maternal, stress to the mother during pregnancy, whether it is psychological stress, exposure to neurotoxins in the atmosphere, malnutrition, infections during pregnancy, etc., or adverse childhood experiences during infancy, childhood, adolescence, or adolescent adversities. These are known to very, very strongly influence how the brain is sculpted and how young people develop psychological abilities with which to deal with their challenges. This modifies brain development to create the psychological vulnerabilities. I thought you might be interested in some of the work that we've been doing. This, for example, is work done across a very large number of subjects across the world. Basically, we use data from almost 1.5 lakh people across the world, and we found that increased inequality in societies was consistently associated with how brains grew. And in this particular study, we were able to show that it was consistently associated with alterations in brain growth, for example, alterations in areas of the brain which are responsible for memory, for other cognitive functions, etc. And therefore, higher human development has been consistently associated with better brain growth. So poverty, socioeconomic status is an important issue. This is again work from our group which showed that childhood adversity typically affects brain maturation. So the frequency of childhood adversity is strongly associated with dissimilar patterns and aberrant growth of parts of the brain. Here they're called default mode network, which are associated with the ego, with developing sense of self, purpose in life, etc. So people who have early adversity go on to develop very brittle personalities, brittle temperament, etc. Again, this is work that we have done earlier, which showed that children who face early adversity and multiple adversities have blunting of the stress hormone cortisol, which means that later in life, when they have to handle stress, they find it very difficult to handle stressful situations, and therefore that results in greater problems in handling stressful situations. Let me just go through this fast. Okay, this is again a very busy slide, but I thought you would find it interesting. This is work from our Param cohort, where we are following up 15,000 children all across India, and we are following them up from -6 months, that is second trimester pregnancy, to 35 years of life. And here we are able to find patterns which are emerging. So we found one cluster of children who have very high adversity in childhood, whether it is social adversity, parenting, etc., but who have more negative temperament in childhood. They have moderate family attachment, but they have a positive school climate. And to start with, when we started seeing them 10 years ago, they had higher baseline behavioral problems. When we followed them up over 10 years, we find that what had happened to them was there was a broad improvement among these temperamentally vulnerable adolescents, although they were facing adversity. But just one factor, positive school environment, had allowed them to have improvement in their temperamental problems, the behavioral problems that they had 10 years back. On the other hand, we have another group of people who were growing up with low adversity. They had moderate temperament, stronger family attachment, but they had negative or less supportive school climate, but they had moderate baseline behavioral problems. 10 years later, their symptoms remained stable. They didn't get better, they didn't get worse. We have another group of children who we are following up, who to start with had higher adversity. They had more positive temperaments. Note, these kids had more positive temperament, but they had lower family attachment, though they came from higher resources and they had positive school climate. And they started off with lower baseline behavioral problems. So basically, these were kids who had higher adversity, though they came from richer families, families with more attachment. They came from better schools, and they started off without too many problems. But because of lower family attachment, poorer parenting in these families, we are finding 10 years later that these kids are getting emerging social difficulties in this temperamentally positive group. Uh, and we think that it's because of, despite wealthier family background, because they have weaker attachment in families. So I want to, I think this is time to basically talk uh, about the importance of family and parenting. And because I know that a lot of you are involved in helping parents with that. And so what we are finding, especially for adolescents, is that although influence, social media exposure, access, inadequate support from schools and community increase the vulnerability and the risk for mental illness, parenting plays a buffering role against negative environmental influences. Okay, and what do we mean by parenting? I mean, proper engaged parenting, not just parenting. Conducive parenting is one where there is high monitoring and support. There is low direct involvement, which allows the child to become autonomous. It facilitates autonomy. There is high positive interaction between parents and child. So these are the three things we found seem to help, especially adolescents, prevent themselves from, or rather prevent adolescents from developing these vulnerabilities which lead to mental illness. Non-conducive parenting, on the other hand, is sometimes you have excessive involvement. Excessive involvement is very, very necessary for younger children. But for adolescents, excessive involvement becomes something which we are finding to be a negative factor. Or there is, on the other hand, complete lack of involvement, that is neglectful parenting. There is excessive use of punishment and control, that is harsh parenting. Again, we find that these three things seem to be things which are not protective. These actually increase vulnerability. Adverse family environments can also increase neglectful parenting, because obviously, in families where there is poverty, or both parents spend a lot of time at work and are not able to give time to the children, all that. So adverse family environments are also something that we need to look out for. So we need to identify and provide extra-familial support systems. These are children who do well when there are extra-familial support systems. So we've seen families where the immediate family, father, mother is absent, or father is absent because of alcoholism, but some aunt will take over, or some grandmother will take over, and that seems to buffer or support the children. Harsh parenting in vulnerable adolescents actually can amplify the experiences of trauma and emotional abuse. So these are some of these interesting things that we are getting, studying what is happening to children, what is, the forces that are increasing the risk of children of developing problems. I think what is happening. Okay. I think this is also time to talk a little bit about how to help teachers recognize some of the early signs of children who are likely to develop problems. So number one, obviously, is poor academic performance. And it's not just poor academic performance, it's a sudden drop in academic performance, failure to complete assignments, lack of engagement in class, etc. Then the other thing to note is social withdrawal. Suddenly a child, becomes quiet, keeps their head down, avoids eye contact, is not mixing with friends. So marked changes are things that one needs to be sensitive to, whether it's a change from the beginning of the school year or a sudden change in behavior. Norm violation, I mean, that is an important thing. When children have suddenly start behaviors that break rules or violate the norms of the classroom, there's something going on and you need to look for it. Crying or tearfulness, inappropriate reaction, reacting inappropriately to teachers' directions, or a disproportionate response to being corrected, spontaneously acting out, intense emotional outbursts, aggression with peers, bullying, fighting, absenteeism or tardiness, appearance, change in appearance, child wearing disheveled clothes, having poor hygiene, being more drowsy, self-harm. I mean, a lot of the children with self-harm, often you suddenly find a child wearing full sleeve shirt all the time, refusing to mix with people because they are scared that the cuts on their arms are seen. Sadness, seeming unhappy or sad, is again another red flag. Hyperactivity and the inability to sustain motivation. This children not living up to their potential. I mean, teachers will tell you. The danger is that when you get a child who is difficult, when the child is not performing well, the traditional way is to actually send the child to the back of the class, where there are also other children who have similar difficulties, which actually exacerbates, it actually worsens the problem. These are the children who should be kept in the front rows so that, they are helped. They are, the teacher is able to give them their full attention. Okay, I'm winding down now. I have two sections. One is to basically talk about uh, a general approach to young people with problems. And if there is time, I will spend a little bit of time talking about what one can do when a child comes for therapy. How deal with some of the difficulties, if that is of interest to you. One is what we call universal intervention. This is something that all young people should get. And unfortunately, this is missing from most of our young people's lives. In fact, as was alluded to in the introduction, that these are the challenges of modern day living. We need to help upskill and build resilience from childhood. This will help young people develop increased control of cognitive abilities and emotional states. We also need to be able to provide a protective scaffolding with activities of daily life. Again, that is something that is disappearing in young people's lives today. We need to be able to help them deal with cues from the social environment. And most importantly, we need to be able to help them make sense of what is going on, difficulties that they face, failures that they would have had, and provide direction. So some of the things that needs to be dealt with is engaged parenting, like I discussed a little while back. Passionate teaching and social protections. There have to be social protections. We cannot grow our children in societies where there is a lot of social threat. One, skilling, including coping skills in school and family settings, and strengthening individual super skills. Even the children who have greatest of difficulties will have some skills that they are really, really good at. And it is necessary for the adult to go looking for that super skill and to promote that super skill as the core around which the child can then learn other skills. The other thing is promoting socialization. Socialization, creativity, building a positive sense of self and purpose, understanding the self and the world through things like art, theater, poetry, conversation, etc. Again, these are things which are going out of our children's lives. We are more focused on the child learning the lesson or going to tuition rather than promoting creativity in our children, and that has not helped human beings at all. Reliable, consistent adult mentoring. We keep talking about peer, but most of our children, again, lack the presence of a consistent adult mentor, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a parent, whether it's an uncle, whoever, who will mentor them and provide them direction. Most importantly, help them make sense of what is going on. Adding movement in everyday life. And this is something that, again, there has been a lot of recent work which shows that whether it is games, team sports, or just walking to the to the market or to the supermarket rather than taking a car, these are things which help brain growth and cognitive growth. Nutritional support, avoiding highly processed foods. promoting healthy eating. Again, very recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a huge amount of work which show the importance of this. And this has been disappearing from our children's lives, where, most of our children are eating highly processed food. There is chips or kurkure or, Maggi noodles, things like that. Initiating consistent patterns of sleep, activities of daily living, and normative rituals. Rituals, I don't mean religious rituals. I mean the daily rituals of everyday living, things which build value, etc. And of course, dealing with pressures of social media, screen time, and substance use. And these are very, very important for upskilling and building resilience in children. The second thing is to delay first use. How does one do that? Not by saying thou shalt not use, not by showing pictures of Gandhi and prohibition, but using brain-based information, using conversation versus fear or morality. Remember that fear-based tactics have never worked. The second thing that never works is calling some people who have had problems or calling people from AA and getting them to talk about how badly they have been affected, getting survivors to talk to them. That also doesn't work at all. And there's a lot of data to show that. Informal social controls. These are very, very important in terms of delaying first use, helping young people's behaviors. And of course, you need to reduce easy availability, especially to vulnerable children, and you need to provide alternatives and alternative models. How does one remedy? Remedy is young people who already have psychological vulnerabilities, and I've spoken a lot about it. So a method of screening, brief intervention, and referral treatment. So that one needs to be able to help parents and teachers to identify needs in children at risk. We need to be able to strengthen their support, brief interventions, and then refer to professionals if required. Again, here, consistent adult mentoring, early interventions become very, very important. And some of the things like informal social controls, training primary physicians to recognize some of these things early, drink drive programs, etc., are very useful. I'm rushing through this because this is more for people who are adolescents at high risk. Same things that I talked about in the last slide, and you need to preempt, use selective interventions for persons who have already started, people who have already developed harmful or hazardous use but have not yet developed addiction. So you need to be able to have some sort of screening, and this is better done through training primary care physicians who will recognize them when they go, or primary care physicians who will recognize people who go with some alcohol-related harm, whether it is medical or whether it is after a head injury or after some trauma, drink drive programs, etc. I'm not going too much into detail, but I'm happy to talk about it later. Okay, this is the last section. I need to see how much time. It's 4 o'clock. When do you want me to stop? Do you want me to stop here?
So we would request you to complete this next section as well. That is most relevant to us.
Okay,
To
all
all
right.
of us, yeah.
So I will take about 10 minutes on this.
Sure.
Okay. So normally when a young child is dragged to meet you or us, the parents come in with a set of thoughts in their head. One of the most important things is what will people think, because they are ashamed about what their child is doing. Or side by side, they have this worry that, will he get hurt? Will we lose him? What will happen to our dreams for my child? Along with that, there is a strong feeling of rejection. Why is this child doing this to us? So there is also anger. So parents come in with a lot of mixed feelings. And there is also a lot of guilt. Where did we go wrong? Did we do something wrong? And these need to be answered, because the other thing that parents often do is say that this is not my child's fault, it's somebody else's fault. It's the drugs which are responsible, or it's his friends which are responsible. Before he started using the drugs, he was perfectly okay. Before he started moving with these friends, he was perfectly okay. On the other hand, the child comes in feeling very ambivalent. At one level, the child feels that this, whatever I'm doing, helps me. I find it useful. I find it interesting. I find it good. But there's also a counter a dialogue in the child's mind which says, "Hey, this gets me into trouble." And most of the people who walk into your clinic or counseling center have this kind of dual position, and this gives rise to anger. This gives rise to feelings of rejection, shame, and they tend to hit out at other people or hurt themselves. On the other hand, what happens to the professional who is meeting the child? At one level, most of us have what is called this writing reflex. As soon as I see something wrong, as a human being, my immediate reaction would be, let's make this right. Whether the person is in a position to, or is in a has reached the same feeling that this needs to be dealt with, our position is, okay, let's do something about it. And this is a very human situation. I'm not blaming anybody for it. But sometimes this becomes a roadblock. The other thing is that we have this anxiety that we need to do right, we need to be effective. What will people say? What will I think if I do? Will it be a failure if I'm not able to do something? Side by side, there is this thing that, look, I'm in a better position to know what's good for you than you, because of the superior knowledge that I have, because of my superior skills, because of who I am, etc., etc. And this often translates into, I'll prove to you that you are an addict or that you have this and you need to change. I'm, of course, overstating this. This is not exactly how we feel, but then there is this tendency of clinicians, there is this tendency of people who are trained to say, okay, you are saying that you don't have a problem. Let me show you how the problem. Do you have this? Do you have that? Do you have that? That means you have this. So that results in an attempt to label that you have this condition. You are an addict. You are a depressed person. You are this. This tends to get us into this situation where we get into this sawal jawab, question answer thing. I'm asking you this, you answer, I question, you answer, and then I say, look, this means this. This, of course, gets us into this. We confront, they deny. And again, along with that, there is this blaming, expert trap, premature focus. So premature focus is something that often happens where as soon as the person walks in, you say, I know what's wrong with him. And I know what we need to do. And so let's do it. But it doesn't take into account that the person who has walked into your room has not yet reached that stage, has not yet reached the stage of knowing that this is wrong with me and this is what needs to be done. So sometimes what happens is that the therapist and the client are talking from two different platforms, from two different levels. So it's almost as if somebody is talking in Hindi, the other person is talking in Pushtu. So often there is a overlap of ideas, there's an overlap of, not overlap, a non-overlap of ideas and a non-overlap of goals. And this gives rise to confrontation, which then we say is denial. So the response is, I am not this and I will fight this label. And there is this ambivalence, which the person is already fighting with. It helps me, I like it, but it hurts. It's been hurting for a long time. And this comes out as argument, this comes out as interruption, this comes up as the patient ignoring or denying or passively agreeing because you are socially at a higher level or professionally at a higher level. So the child passively agrees, and there is flight into hell saying, okay, if I say yes, this fellow will get out of my hair. and I can, I don't want to confront, and to avoid confronting, I am agreeing to whatever you're saying, but it does not translate into behavioral change. So what and how do we use as an engagement strategy? What do we teach? And this is something that we teach our students. We use certain techniques. We use this OARSC technique and a decisional balance to deal with this. And the aim is to roll with resistance, avoid argumentation, avoid confrontation and other roadblocks. The OARSC is nothing very strange. I'm sure all of you have gone through it. But just to ensure that we are on the same page, it's about open-ended questioning, affirmations, using reflections, using summarization, and looking for change talk. One of the things that we try and do and try and train our students a lot is to reframe. How do we reframe? Most of the people who come in a stuck stage. They're asking the same questions, getting the same answers. So the aim is to use a slightly different explanatory model so as to get the person to look at whatever they're suffering in a slightly different way and ask a different question so that they are able to process different answers, and to promote change talk, to provide a divergent strategy, a workable framework, and goals which are then doable. So what we do focus on, going back to some of the things that I talked on, is focus on areas which have been lifelong concern for the young person. The lack of success, the fact that the person has been in a stuck state for which the youngster has been searching for maladaptive solutions. What we try and share or try and sell is this explanatory model of skills deficiency. That look, have you had this kind of difficulty? The person walks in thinking that you're going to talk about alcohol and drugs. When a young person with alcohol and drugs walks into my clinic, the last thing I discuss is alcohol and drugs. What I usually do, let me come back to this. What I usually do is, let's talk about what brought you here. I mean, I realize you got dragged in against your will, but thanks for coming anyway. Okay, why did you come here? So my parents brought me in. You asked my parents. So I say, okay, so that's your parents' point of view. What is your point of view? So then we use what is called a decisional balance. So you can use the traditional decisional balance by saying, so what's the good thing about this particular thing that you're doing? Tell me something more about how it helps you. How would you, be if you didn't have this? How would your life be different? And then contrast it with some of the not so good things. We'll come to this. So usually, I don't even talk about this particular drug, alcohol, etc. What I do is, I'd say, do you mind if I spend a little time getting to know who you are as a person? Most people say yes. Okay. So can I ask you a few questions to get you onto some things I'm really interested in knowing about you? Then I go through are you less or more impulsive than other young people your age? Do you have less difficulties or greater difficulties in sustaining motivation? Do you start off things halfway through? Do you lose interest? Does that mean that you're not able to, finish most things? Do you shift from task to task? Do you procrastinate a lot? Are you more likely to get bored very easily? So I run through that. Then what I do is I reframe. So how has this affected your life? Would you like to do something about this? And most of the times they say this has affected their life very badly. They have not been able to work in school, their relationships. Then I asked, are you interested in doing something about this? Most of these kids have come waiting to fight with me, saying, I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not a drug addict. And we're not even talking about that. We are talking about something totally different. And we have reframed the alcohol or the drug use as a way of coping with the difficulties that the young person has. And so suddenly the young person turns out, yeah, I mean, do you really think I can do something about this? I've failed all my life because of this. I say, yeah, but you might have to do something about your substance use, your alcohol use, your cannabis use. By which time he's saying, okay, I'll think about that, but let me hear a little bit more about what you're saying, how I can change some of these difficulties in my life. Okay, so, uh, okay. One thing that I just want to end with is what we call denial is actually ambivalence. What appears to be resistance in clients is often imbalance and confusion about change. It's a simultaneous attraction and a resistance to change. So, how does one change this? So, most people are in a stuck state because they are. It's like a balance. The costs of the status quo, the costs of remaining the same, against the benefits of change. So, what keeps you in your current behavior? That I'm scared of what will happen if I change, as well as I am happy with some of the things that I am now some of the things about my current behavior. What will make you change? I look forward to some of the uh, things that I will gain if I am able to change, as well as I there are certain things in my current behavior that I do not like. So any therapist has to use their skills to shift from this current stage to another stage. I'm happy to talk about it later, but basically this is what, when you are able to hit the scales, change or consideration of change happens. And so these are some of the tools of the trade. I already talked about it. I'm not going to go into it, but to summarize, what I spoke about is that most of the times our clients are predominantly, our focus is predominantly on problems of youngsters. And therefore, we need to work with teachers and parents, and we need to have the information to help teachers and parents. Second thing is that I talked about was the fact that some of the difficulties that we face are transdiagnostic. They are the basis for a lot of other mental health problems, but there is a core, a behavioral core, which we need to recognize and learn to respond to. The third thing is that using this behavioral core, our knowledge of this behavioral core, we need to reframe both for ourselves so that we are more sensitive and we know what to handle, as well as for the youngsters and caregivers and teachers, so as to give them a different frame on which to work and to work out solutions which then become easier. We need to look at both all three: universal, selective, and indicated interventions. And the skills to engage, motivate to change, to mentor, and to provide a menu of options are the skills that we need to focus on. I'll stop there. As you realize that I've gone all over the place and I might have confused you a little bit, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Benegal. First of all, on behalf of all, I'm Lakshmi. I'm from Sneha Society for Counseling. And on behalf of all the volunteers and all the participants today, I'd like to first of all express our heartfelt gratitude for taking the time to share many insights and the expert knowledge that you have. And it has been totally enlightening because almost every slide I can say, I mean, there was some takeaway for everyone. And we are really grateful. And especially, I think the way we look at who are the people who are vulnerable, what is the kind of risks, the common vulnerability risks or the traits. I mean, these were things, though we are aware, it was put up very well that we could relate to very easily. And of course, the importance of, what are the kind of preventions we can do, what are the kind of modifiable risks, which is in our control that as parents or teachers that we can actually, address or work towards in helping these adolescents. So these were really very important takeaways. And coming to when actually a child comes to for therapy, and we could relate exactly to what we do at a counseling center in terms of avoiding very prescriptive kind of approach, and how to understand what exactly the person is going. So it was overall very informative and very eye-opening for many of us. I would like to just look at the chat, and I would like to spend little time on the kind of questions which have come. Yeah. One Padmini has asked, could you elucidate a little more about what constitutes informal social controls?
So in terms of and informal social controls, of course, I was specifically referring, but not all the time, to substance use. Now, most of the time, there have been some controls which have been there in society. In terms of, for example, just to illustrate, in terms of alcohol use, that you do not start drinking before you are an adult. There is a lot of pressure on young people not to drink. That even as an adult, there are informal social controls that even if you drink, getting intoxicated is not such a good idea. Although in Indian society, it's the opposite, because we tend to believe that what's the point of getting drinking if you don't get drunk? But there are certain things like, if you must drink, you should eat with it, or that most importantly, that getting drunk and beating your wife and child is not a good thing. Side by side, there are informal social controls which are exerted, that work on the people who are, say, for retail sellers, that you will not sell to a child. That, working with bartenders, that if you find somebody who's a child who comes into your thing, that you will not serve the person. So some of these things used to be very strong, and there used to be fairly strong informal social control. They're called informal because these are not legislated by any law.
Exactly.
And these are things that we as members of society exert, and we help each other exert. So, I mean, I just give you a few basic examples. So there are a lot of these things. Also things like, I mean, informal social controls also go slightly wider. That children will go and play in the playing field. That children will not be encouraged to play with each other over their cell phone. Parents will decide that it is not such a good idea to give your child a cell phone, at
a certain
the age
age.
of 6 or 8. So again, these are things that we have lost along the way. I mean, now if the child is being difficult or asking for attention, you hand the child an iPad, or you put the TV on and say, look at this, do this. I mean, we would rather do that than, teach the child primary socialization by socializing ourselves. So this is a whole host of things which are informal because they cannot be legislated, but these are very important social controls.
True. Yeah. Lakshmi Mohan, can you please unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, good afternoon, doctor, and good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I have a small doubt, like all these disorders which you mentioned during the session, I would like to know, is this directly related to the brain design of each individual?
Okay. So we now understand that most of our psychological abilities, the psychological abilities which we use day in and day out to respond or engage with our environment, those are outcomes of brain networks, part of the brain working together. Okay. And alteration in these psychological abilities, which increases our vulnerability to developing, sets of problems, which we then call mental illnesses. Ultimately, what are mental illnesses? It's not something which it's not like a giraffe or a zebra or a thing. It's a difficulty in dealing with your day-to-day challenges. And there are characteristic ways in which we have difficulties, and therefore, professionals and psychiatrists like me have given them names. But it's not as if that is something that exists in real life, like a gorilla or a chimpanzee or a baboon. It's just today I'm able to deal with my difficulties. Tomorrow I have a difficulty dealing with my challenges. And if you have a set of psychological abilities which makes you much more vulnerable to stress, I'm more likely to get problems earlier and faster. And if I have psychological abilities by which I can deal with stress better, deal with all these challenges better, I have better resilience. Okay, so this artificial division that we psychiatrists do is probably not a very good thing. It's good for us because it helps us talk to each other. But when you deal with human beings, you need to be able to look at the whole spectrum of abilities and difficulties.
Coming back to another question on the chat, Doctor, can you please give some insight on AI romance addiction in adolescents?
Okay, this is not something that I know very much about. This is something which has happened very recently, that people are now using AI. What's the word that they use? But basically, AI. There's a word for that. They're chatting to AI, they're talking to AI, and they're getting in, and the AIs have now become, artificial intelligence has now become so intelligent that it answers back in very intimate ways. And so people are, developing intimate relationships, affective relationships with these, which is obviously bad. I mean, this goes back to what we were discussing, that forget about AI. You see a boy and a girl sitting in a cafe. They are being intimate with each other through their cell phones.
Right.
Right? And this is wrong. This is essentially anti-human. So we have, in a way, given all the human attributes to machines. Thinking was something human beings did well. Being emotional was something that human beings were manufactured for. Falling in love was something that human beings were manufactured for. Now we've given that to the machines.
Machines, yeah. And most of the time it gives you what you want and not the overall picture.
Sometimes it doesn't. So sometimes, I mean, there have been two very, very publicized cases where somebody was basically asking AI about their depression, etc. And the AI actually told them how to commit suicide.
Right.
So, I mean, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, one family, like they sued the
the company, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Then there's another question from Tejal Thomas. As a class teacher and principal, what can I do to control or discard use of cigarettes, vapes, and alcohol from class 5 to 12 students, which is now a common problem seen in schools?
Yeah. So one is, I mean, children should not be bringing that as well as cell phones into schools. Most schools have a policy. So number one, you have a policy. First of all, I'm very shocked to hear that your class fives are bringing in vapes and cigarettes into their class. But well, I suppose that is happening. So the school should have a policy that these will not be allowed. So if you have vapes, phones, etc., they need to be left outside. The parents need to be responsible for their children bringing it in, because the parents need to have some sense of agency here. I mean, I do not believe that the children should be punished and sent home or whatever. But yes, if they bring it in, it should be confiscated and it should be given to their parents.
Yeah, I had a question, Doctor. Suppose parents bring their child with this kind of a problem of substance abuse or anything like, technology abuse. So as therapists, do we address them or do we send them to somebody, like for example, NIMHANS has the shut clinic, or do you have any guidelines for that?
I would think that you would start discussing that, because number one, you are in a less threatening
Environment, yeah.
environment, you provide a much more, how will I say, um, community environment than NIMHANS can. Children also respond a lot, and although we keep saying that there is no stigma, there is a stigma for children getting pulled in. Let's accept that. And so I would think that it's something that you deal with. And again, it's part of these informal social controls. These are things that we as adults in human society feel that we need to work on.
True. Yeah. If does anyone have any other questions related to today's topic? And there are some general questions related to parenting. I would like to take it up after there are any more questions related to this topic, today's topic. Okay, 1 minute. Yeah, there was one question from Hema which says in one slide there was something about genetics which is unmodifiable. Doctor, can you explain it?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, I was talking about risk factors. As of now, you can't modify your genes. Hopefully that will change. It's scary, but it's already people have started, which is why I said that is unmodifiable. The other things, childhood adversity, maternal adversity, all these are modifiable things. And again, we need to be able to focus on that, to modify that, so that the risks in our children, in people, come down. We can't change everything, but there are certain things that we can certainly address.
The environmental factors can definitely be changed.
Environmental factors can be addressed. I mean, early, for example,
nurturing,
dealing first use is something which is absolutely practical.
Practical, true, yeah.
And to be fair, when you allow your child to use an iPad at 5, you actually increase the chance of your child using cannabis at 11.
Absolutely.
So these are inextricably
closely linked. Yeah. There's one question. Due to wrong parenting, screening has become an addiction with 11-year-old. Absenteeism from school. He has high IQ, temper tantrums, crying, etc. Now parents trying to restrict phone. It's not a conducive environment at home between husband and wife as well. So will a residential school be helpful? So again, it comes back to controls and...
Yeah. Again, I mean, that is not really the answer
to the correct.
See, the larger issue is, and we are really stuck. Where are the playing fields?
Correct.
Where is the possibility of a child cutting down on Maggie and kurkure?
Yeah, it's at home.
Right. So where can you get children to respect the fact that I will not use a phone after, of course, for my studies, etc. It is important. You have to. You can't escape that. But where can you get children to actually respect the fact that 2 hours before sleep I will not use my cell phone, or I will not use an electronic device? Or how will you tell the child that, the reason why you should not be using an electronic device 2 hours before sleep is because the scanning lines in your telephone or on your TV actually make your brain oscillate at a much higher level than the normal oscillation, which is why your brain cannot go to sleep, which is why your brain cannot, relax. And it's oscillating whereas your normal brain rhythm is 8 to 12 cycles per second. The one on your phone is around 60 cycles per second.
True.
So we need to be able to give information like that to the children, and children are bright. Children actually respond to information when it's given to them.
True. Yeah, there's one more question. As a counselor, how to interact with the teachers of the client? What do we tell them? As a counselor, what do we tell the teachers of the child who has come for therapy?
Do you have access to the teacher of the client?
No, sometimes there are school counselors.
Okay. So these are some of the things that you really need to be able to tell them, because a lot of people are not doing this out of malice. They're doing it because they know no better. So given proper information, I am absolutely confident most human beings act for the good. So we need to give them the information. We need to give them the tools.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Sharmila has raised her hand. Can you please unmute and ask your question?
Namaskara. I'm Sharmila, speaking from Mysore. My question is, Doctor, earlier when I was during my childhood days, I was very bright enough, and I had like an memory. Once when I hear something, I could grasp it. I had such good memory power. Over the time, due to stress and responsibilities, and I have become like this, and I also speak like this. My I don't know what should I do to overcome all this.
Meet somebody. I'm not going to make a diagnosis on online here,
Yeah.
but do meet somebody and talk to them about any difficulties you might be having. And I'm sure there is an answer to that. I'm sure you will find a way to deal with some of the difficulties that you're talking about.
Earlier, I was also hearing when somebody's talked to me in American accent, I was like hearing like Chinese. From that stage, I've come till here, and still I cannot speak in Kannada fluently. I cannot read Kannada. When the doctor says that you can gain everything back, but
Yeah, maybe you need to meet somebody who'll spend a little bit of time understanding your problem.
Okay.
This is a very, very brief encounter. I
Yeah.
don't think I can understand your problem in this brief while. So why don't you go ahead and meet somebody? Maybe you can get in touch with people at Sneha, and they can put you in touch with people in Mysore.
Okay.
I'd also be willing to help if you want us to guide you to somebody in Mysore.
Sure, doctor.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. Yeah, if there's any more questions, I've just gone through some of the questions which was given even earlier, and almost everything has been addressed. So if there's any other question, otherwise we will continue with the rest of the program. Okay.
1 minute, please. Can you please share the slides which can be asked from the counselor side? The last 3 slides. Later, ma'am. Can you please share it with me?
Yeah, the one which we displayed at the beginning, is that what you're referring
At the
to?
ending.
Yeah, we will do that.
From the
Yeah, we will do that. Yeah. Okay. So, Doctor, that was really very, very enlightening and informative for us. And I think throughout your expertise and the kind of the work that you've been doing, the contributions that you have done to the field of psychiatry and addiction medicine, which is by itself very commendable, and how you have presented to us and brought it to us in a very, very relatable way was extremely good. And we are extremely grateful that you made time for us today, this afternoon. And thank you once again. And we really wish you continued success in all the work that you're doing. Yeah. And to all the participants, thank you for attending this session in great numbers. We touched more than 100 and posing very, very interesting questions, and which was informative, helped all of us to understand better. And many of the insights, as I've already mentioned, was an eye opener, and I'm sure many of us would want to revisit the slides, or so we will try and put it on our YouTube channel. Doctor, with your permission, can we put it on the YouTube channel? Yeah, so we will put it so that people can visit it at a later point in time. And as we all know, we all have a collective responsibility towards today's adolescents, because the kind of problems, the kind of exposure they have. And so it's very important for us to understand that times have really changed, and we need to align ourselves and see how we can help the adolescents in the current scenario that we are all living. And the first step for that is becoming aware. So to bring about awareness, and that's the very reason why Sneha Society organized this webinar for all of us. So at least there's a little bit of awareness why certain children are more vulnerable, why and how as parents and how as a school authorities, how we can help them with the kind of skills to cope and delay the first use and so on. So there were so many strategies that Dr. Enumerated. So I think all of us have a collective responsibility, and if for any further help, can please reach out to Sneha, and we will see what we can do for you. Like we already said, our services are free and confidential. Finally, big thanks to all these Sneha volunteers for helping to reach to many people who got benefited of this webinar. A truly memorable one, and I'm sure we will all come back to refer to what was covered today and get a better understanding with each time we go through that. Thank you, Doctor, once again for making time for us. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.